if I'm honest, man, sometimes I think that a lot of Christians, like, we like abuse creativity. Like, we don't really know what it's for. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Or we. And this is just gonna sound a little bit crazy.
Welcome to the Change Podcast. In this podcast, we will talk about creativity and how we can use it to advance the kingdom of God and push today's culture towards change. Don't forget to like, follow, and share, and I hope you guys enjoy today's episode.
Yeah, okay. I got some things that I'm trying to get done, but they steady keep talking, I ain't worried about it. They say I'm dead wrong when I'm trying to do right. It ain't crossed my mind, I ain't heard about it. He start talking and got now he preaching that word. He gon' hop on the beat, bring the church. I was scared where I'm at, I got him outside, so I know it ain't nothing to be nervous about it. 2 Tito, I just been kicking in bed, 2 feet up. I'm off of that side where they bring.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Change Podcast. This is our first episode, and I'm really excited to kind of get this started. It's just going to be a podcast kind of talking about the creative side of what it looks like to walk with God, and how we can use our skills and our talents to grow closer to Him, but also use those skills and talents to glorify Him. I'm excited to have our first guest is Jarrell Flowers. Jarrell is a music artist and spoken word poet, known for his involvement in many different ministries and organizations around the San Antonio area, and I'm really excited to kind of get to talking. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I feel honored. This is like the first one. And
Really?
so when this thing blows up, bro, they're going to go back into the archives and be like, yo, and I'll be discovered. So that's awesome.
I'm definitely excited. And I hope to have on people like you and people that are in different fields, and like youth pastors, people in the church, and people that are using like different creative things like music and clothing and even like camera work, stuff like that. I think the production side of a lot of things is really growing, especially with like the younger generation, you know, and like things like social media. So if you kind of want to tell like a quick testimony, just about your life and kind of what brought you to where you are today, and the things that you do in your life and music and just your walk with God and how music has kind of played a role in that, if that makes sense.
So I'll just give like a little short version of my testimony. I grew up in I'm a PK, so I'm a pastor's kid. My parents were also in the military, and so I grew up like on base housing and all that kind of stuff, heavily involved in church. At the same time, I was also really intrigued by music, and specifically like hip hop. And with me growing up in a Christian household, my parents never said that you couldn't do hip hop, but I just never saw people doing hip hop like from the church. You know what I'm saying? And so everything that I thought about hip hop was just like, you know, like Tupac and Biggie and like people saying all kind of craziness. And then as it, you know, progressed, it, you know, you had other MCs that were, you know, talking about a whole lot of other things. So I just never had like that example, right, of anything godly. So it was one day we were actually watching Christian television, and there was this guy who like did a rap verse in one of his like CCM songs. And I was like, what? Like as a kid, I was like, you can do that? Like I had no idea. Walked away, ended up writing my first verse. It was trash, but it was a start, and I did it, and I just kept writing. Well, I grew up. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life when I graduated from high school, and there was this lady that told my dad, hey, I think Bible school would be a great idea for your son. I didn't want to do Bible school, didn't want to do any of that kind of stuff. I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, and I ended up, one day I was coming home, borrowing my mom's car. My mom's car would just stop in the middle of the road sometimes. Don't ask me why I was driving it. I was trying to get by. And ironically, I lived on a street called Holy Cross, and I was crossing the intersection to get onto Holy Cross, and the car stalled in the middle of the road. I got T-boned, car got totaled, all that kind of stuff, and I walked away with that. I walked away without a scratch, and the Lord like used that scenario to challenge me. Hey, like, are you actually a disciple of Jesus, or are you just kind of playing the church thing? I was playing the church thing. And so God from that point started getting me into like deeper and deeper surrender to him. And so I ended up going to Bible school after my first year, started a rap group, and that didn't last too long for various reasons. So it didn't last too long. Started doing my own thing, came back, jumped into youth ministry, which is another thing that I didn't really want to do at the time, but like, again, deeper levels of surrender to the Lord. And I keep doing music the entire time. And so I got into youth ministry, started touring while I was doing youth ministry, didn't have a community as a creative. And then so that's when I started Rise. So yeah, that's awesome. There's a lot of stuff in between that, but like that's the short story. Yeah.
Do you think that like you doing music and all these different things, like being like youth ministry, things like that, do you think there was a calling on your life to pursue music or to pursue one thing, or was it kind of like you're just open to what does God want me to do, and then he has you doing kind of all these things while you're kind of figuring out like this trajectory of what does my future look like?
Yeah.
What does life look like after going to school and all these things? So do you think there was like a calling to one of those things, or were you kind of just doing?
I think that for me, like the journey that God has put in front of me is like it's preordained. Like I truly believe that. You know what I mean? I think that, you know, my gifts, my passion, and my story, like when those things intersect, like that's the sweet spot of what God wants me to do. And music has always been a passion of mine. So I knew that it was going to be like a part of me in some way, like in the future. I've always known that, you know what I mean? Even from like producing and all this kind of stuff, playing around on the keyboard, like I knew God was going to do something with that. But like for me, sometimes I do get stuck on this is how it's going to happen, and God blows that up every single time. Yeah. So like it feels like all these side missions, and they're not like those were God's plans the entire time. So like youth ministry, all that kind of stuff. During that time, I see it now. God gave me a heart for youth during that time, and I was, you know, at first I was just kind of like rapping. I wanted to rap to them, but I didn't want to like be with them. You know what I'm saying? And then like the Lord just used that time to actually give me a heart for kids. So now I'm like walking with gang members out, you know, getting outside of the gangs, and like kids, you know, trying to figure out their identities, and like, you know, babies and all this kind of stuff like happening. And I'm like, oh, these are the people that I'm talking to. You know what I'm saying? Like it didn't click until I started actually working with kids, and I was like, oh snap. So I see the Lord's hand in it the whole time. You know what I'm saying? So music, again, I feel like it was always going to be a part of my life, but the detours, I felt like they were detours. They were really God's providence the whole time. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah. What do you think is your like? I guess what would your title be for I guess like who you are right now, what you're doing right now? Are you like music artist, or are you busy running these ministries? Are you the head of these organizations? Are you just part of it? Like what is your kind of role, or kind of this like what would you call yourself, I guess?
Yeah, so you're asking me what I identify as. Yeah. Just get all controversial on your first podcast. That's funny. No, so I am like a hip hop spoken word artist, but I'm also the executive director of a nonprofit that my wife and I started called the Rise Movement, and so I do both of those things. So I am creating stuff. In fact, like I'm writing for a project right now. And then I also do creative projects for other churches and other organizations and things like that. So I do that. And then also I oversee like the Rise Movement. So essentially what the Rise Movement is, it's like a network of artist-led communities. So there's like 6 of them right now, and we're about to launch 4 more at the end of the year. And so like I'm overseeing that, you know. So yeah, it's fun. It's kind of a weird, like I feel like I'm bouncing back and forth between like creating content and then trying to like run a nonprofit organization, which is like it feels weird at times, but again, I feel like that's what the Lord called me to do. Yeah. So
that makes sense. I guess we can kind of keep talking about that, like that community aspect of like kind of these different communities or this bigger kind of organization over them. I guess how has like that community like aspect of your life been like so prominent or such a big thing for you, you know?
Yeah.
You seem like a very community I see you everywhere. You're involved in different things, different churches, different ministries, you know? So I guess how do you like being involved in so many different things, how do you like kind of stay focused on like your community or what that community looks like, or like just what does it look like playing a role in all these different communities?
Yeah. So I think it might help like kind of diving deeper into the story of like how the Rise thing got started. So I was actually working at the church and then also doing like touring as an artist, right? And so I had gotten to a point where I was out of the city for almost 100 days, like trying to tour and everything while also doing the youth ministry, right? And the worship arts and all that kind of stuff. And I just got burned out, didn't feel like I had community. So I'm sitting in the church parking lot one day and I'm having thoughts of suicide. And I'm like, yo, this is crazy, you know? And I told my wife about it and she was like, I think you just need to invite some friends over. I think we had 2 girls at the time and they were like really young. Now we have 3. I have a 2-year-old right now, and keep your boy in prayer on that. But yeah, like she said, hey, you know, you need to invite some people over to the house. And so that before that, I wasn't necessarily, I was pushing for community, but it didn't feel like a real need. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I know that I needed it, but I just knew like biblically, hey, there needs to be community in the church and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And it got real that day. And so I was like, okay, how do I form this community? So I actually took my wife's advice, ended up having some people over to the house, and then that just kind of mushroomed. I put it out there and said, hey, any other creatives need community out there, you know? And then we had a little sign up list, and then everybody just started signing up for this community. And I had no idea what that was going to look like. And I was just like, okay, what do we do with all these people? It was like mostly from San Antonio. There was some from out of the city and all this kind of stuff. And so that's kind of how it really got started for me. That's how it became a prominent thing. So I just started like diving into community. And when COVID ended up happening, because we started meeting once a month after that, after people started signing up. So we started meeting like once a month, and then COVID happened. We couldn't meet anymore. Started doing some stuff on Zoom, and that, like, the Lord, as bad as COVID was, right? Like it was also like a reset for me to like dive into community and not just events. Yeah. And so I started diving into a specific group that had formed within Rise. And then out of that, like, people just started saying, hey, man, I want to lead my own group with Rise and all this kind of stuff. And so all these creatives had these ideas about how to lead not just communities, but movements. So, like, you know what I mean? And so I was like, oh, wow. So then I just started trying to figure out how to steward that. And then so one thing led to another, which led to another. And so that's why you probably see me at a lot of different places, because in some form or fashion, like, Rise is connected to some of these things that are happening. So yeah. But I mean, I think the community aspect is just, it's been huge, man. Yeah. Like, being a creative, sometimes I feel like you can just be isolated anyway, just because, you know, for me, like, I'm a writer, right? So I'm going into the deepest parts of my soul, trying to come up with some awesome content and all this kind of stuff to share with the world in hopes that they like it and all this kind of stuff. But I'm you know, sometimes I could be very like introspective and introverted, and so, you know, but in the scripture, we see creativity happens in community, when God said, let us make man in our own image, right? There's He could have said let me, right? Because he's one God, right? But he says let us, and so there's like this communal aspect when it comes to creativity that I don't think a lot of people have really tapped into.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to tap into that and try to get other people to tap into that, because that's where we create our best work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I've seen that a lot, especially when it comes to things in like in today's world with things like you talking about, like secular music and things where it seems like creativity in a lot of people's eyes has been a lot of worldly creativity or whatever you want to call it, I guess. And most of that seems to be alone. There's not a lot of community within that whole realm of whether it's social media or music or any form of like digital art kind of thing. But I think that like in the church, especially, you're seeing that a lot more when it comes to these events. You know, like I'm really into like music artists and going to concerts, going to like kind of connect with artists, Christian artists, and but just seeing the community aspect of it, the community side of it. Yeah. Where they're all friends, they're all hanging out. It's not just we show up as a music artist to perform. It's like, no, they're hanging out in the green room. They're getting to know each other. They know each other's families, their lives, and they're able to share that with everybody, you know. And they're not putting on a performance or like a mask, I guess is the best way to put it. So I think that's been really cool, like to see the community, like it, and I think that's such a biblical church thing. Like people outside of that might not even understand like what that really looks like, you know. They don't get to experience that community or that love that I think that a lot of people within the church like have that, you know.
I would probably also say, man, like there, like community does happen. Like you can't really, like nobody can be an island and be like actually successful, you know what I'm saying? Like even a lot of these guys that are creating projects, man, like music projects, they act like they did it all themselves, but it's not. You do have like the graphic designer and the videographer and the guy who's mixing the songs, and then you have the other guy who's mastering the songs, and you have the executive producer. You have like all of these different people that are playing a role in it, right? Songwriters on different songs. You have 7-8 songwriters, you know what I'm saying? And then multiple people producing tracks. So it's like it happens, but like it's not really celebrated. It's because of our Western mindset. We think like everything's like individualistic. Like, oh, it's me. I came up. You know what I'm saying? I'm the one that did it. It's like in actuality, that's not really the truth. You know,
especially when people see it as a job or like how they get paid, how they make money. Where all those people that are behind the scenes kind of thing, like it seems to be like a lot of the like in the church side of it. There's that true love aspect of like, I'm just willing to help and like not even expecting the money or the thing. And like those things do come and it's part of it. Yeah. But it's definitely that idea of like it's a team effort and it's all celebrated as a team and people know that it's a team behind it, you know? And it's not as like self-focused or self-forward, you know? Because we live in such a selfish world. Everyone's looking out for themselves. They care about their Instagram followers. They care about, like, if they're a music artist, their music streams, you know? Like, it's very, like, focused. Yeah. And I think it's cool to see, like, in the church, a lot of people are becoming more community-focused. And I think where we're seeing a lot of problems with that now is the unity side of community. Things with like even in the church, just beliefs, doctrine, different things that like, and it's kind of just that idea of like agreeing to disagree. I mean, obviously there are biblical truths that everyone that like claims to be a Christian needs should believe. But I know that like different denominations, different doctrines, different churches even. It could be the same denomination of a church, but two different churches, very different people, you know, very different pastors, different background, different everything. True, and I think it's cool to see. I'll even shout out like Ambassadors Coffee. Like that's a cool place where all these communities are kind of colliding and coming together to kind of form its own community there. And seeing how like in that place, it feels very like nobody cares about where you come from, what your background is.
Yeah.
It's very welcoming and loving, as like the church is supposed to be. You know, that unity there is so evident in all of their events and things like that.
Yeah, so true, man. Shout out Ambassador Coffee.
Seriously, you know? It's a cool place. It's really cool. They're doing some incredible things within San Antonio and ministry. I guess we can kind of get into what does it look like being a creative in the church, and like I guess how does that play a role in your relationship with God or your walk with God?
That's a good question, man. Yeah, I think, you know, creativity for me is like, there's something sacred about, for me, there's something sacred about creating. Like, you know, I'll write a song and I'll sit in the car and, you know, especially earlier on, like I used to just be basically like plagiarizing the Bible, you know what I'm saying? Like just try to make it rhyme, and then after that, like I think it was kind of like after that phase where I just started like allowing the Lord to speak to me and to heal me in different ways. Like I didn't really tap into the therapeutic aspect of creativity. Like, man, this is therapy for me, you know. All of that kind of stuff, and then I just related to the Lord in a whole different way. You know what I'm saying? After that, and so now, like I'm sitting in the car and I'm just like I'm processing my life with the Lord. Yeah. And it's like, and this stuff starts coming out, and you know, like I'll be sitting in the car just like crying, bro, like, because I'm just like, man, like this, like the Lord, it's like the Lord sees me, you know what I'm saying? He sees me. He actually knows what I'm going through, and like so he gives me encouraging words like for me, you know, and I'm just like, wow, like this is crazy. And so, you know, when I get stuff like that, I know it's going to encourage somebody else who's walking through some of the same stuff that I'm walking through, you know. And so I think, you know, if I'm honest, man, sometimes I think that a lot of Christians, like we like abuse creativity. Like we don't really know what it's for, you know what I'm saying? Or we and this is going to sound a little bit crazy. So I hope you hear my heart, but a lot of Christians, like they validate creativity if they can put the gospel in it. Yeah. And they're just like, okay, the only reason that creativity has any value is if we like put this scripture or we put this thing or that thing in it. And they don't understand that like God created just because, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. like in the beginning, God created, right? And so like, yes, was there a purpose in it? Yes. But like, there was just like beauty, and it was just everything he created was like an expression of him. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, so I think some of the most powerful art that I've created has just been me being me, and me knowing that I have the Spirit of God on the inside of me. And then just like letting that be that instead of being an agenda. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And feeling like, there's just
like kind of more focused on like the purpose of it rather than just having the freedom to create.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's actually a really cool like thing, just because I really like to say, and so I got this from one of my friends, but all of creativity leads to the source, you know, and God is the source of creativity. And all throughout the Bible, you look at different moments of creativity, you know, and it started with creation. Yeah. You know? It started with God as an artist. He's a creative. You know? Like that's literally all he really is, because that's what he wanted to do in the first place. And it's just still being created, you know? And I think that's such a cool, like, aspect of who God is. Of just being an artist, you know, just wanting to like have that desire to create, as that like that freedom to create, and not where it's like a purpose or I have to do this. It's just a desire to want to, and the love for it. You know, I mean, God loves his creation. You know, he loves us. Just the same way that the things that we can create, like I do think people put a lot of pressure on it where they need it to be perfect, or they need the validation from other people rather than just having the validation of I created this thing because I wanted to and because I love it and I like it and I enjoyed creating it. You know? So I think that's a really big deal, especially in today's world. I mean, with you, I talk a lot about music, but just seeing the music that people are creating, and especially within Christian hip hop, Christian music, every worship music, and seeing the creative freedom that's allowing people to have, you know. And I remember even I've had some like debates that are kind of stupid, but like, is secular art kind of like that kind of topic? And I really think like God wants us to have that freedom to create things, you know. I mean, it doesn't have to like, and the best way to put it is like, if all of creativity leads to the source, you know, all the things that we create do like reflect God, because we were made in His image, you know. It's kind of like, I really like to think of it as when God created Earth, you know, there wasn't buildings, like this house didn't exist, you know, like the cities, all the buildings and stuff. And it's like, you give so much credit to like people that like built these things, but it all leads back to God. You know, if God didn't create the materials, the resources that we have to build the things that exist now, and the new technologies that are coming out. And that's crazy to think about. I mean, this laptop, you know, phones, microphones, like, how did this come to be? Well, God created the resources for it, and man just figured it out. You know, they figured out how to use what God had created, and that He created them too. You know, He created their minds that had the ability to figure it out, how to create things.
Ooh, that's good.
So I think that's a really cool aspect of like creativity and things like that. I guess another thing we can kind of talk about is like, what do you think? I don't know. You said you were kind of involved with youth ministry for a while. Do you think that it seems to me in recent years, youth ministry or young adults, college, that this like age or generation of the church is very different than previous generations, you know. And I guess kind of wanted to ask you, like, what do you think like the future holds for this generation and generations to come, whether that be within the church or also like creativity and kind of just the world that we live in?
Yeah. So yes, I totally agree with you, man. This generation is just different, bro. Like, it's crazy. Kind of like when I was, you know, even when I was doing youth ministry, it's like very much different than today. You know what I mean? And so I think what we're seeing right now is just a difference in, you take a lot of these pastors, right? They grew up in a certain era. You know what I mean? And they grew up in an era where it's kind of like the industrial era where you build a building or you make a company, you get everybody to come in and and their highest aspiration is going to be hired by that company, and hopefully you can move up the ladder and all this kind of stuff. And that was the era, the industrial era, you know what I mean? And so now we're in a different era. This is like the information age, you know what I'm saying? This is technology where people feel empowered because of like knowledge. So here's what's happening. You have the churches now, a lot of them still have that same mindset of they're going to build the church. Yeah. And everybody should come to the church. Like, this is the central place. Everybody should come to the church. Everybody should volunteer all their time at the church. Everybody should do it. Everything's the church. And then hopefully, if you're really good at that, then we can move you up to like staff. And then we can move you up to like part-time. And then you can go full-time. And maybe you could even be a pastor yourself. And then you like, it's the whole like, hey, we're going to try to move up the ladder. Right. Yeah. But we're actually not living in that kind of day today. Yeah. Today you have, and I use this example a lot, but today you have companies like Uber, right? Yeah. Who are saying, you know what, we're actually not going to build this like one big thing. We're actually going to look at people and say, hey, what do you have? How do I help you live a better life? Yeah. So it's like an empowerment thing. Instead of like, hey, come here. No, we're going to empower people out there to live a better life for themselves. And so I think that's what's happening with the church right now. Yeah. we're going through like a massive shift where we're coming away from the whole, hey, the biggest thing is the building and the programs and all that kind of stuff, to now it's like, okay, people are walking away, people like you and younger, like, hey, how can I actually be empowered to do what God's called me to do?
Yeah.
Like, those are the places that people are going to start looking for.
Yeah.
And so how that connects to creativity is that back then, in the industrial age, like, the biggest, I guess I call it a cultural icon, right? So the cultural icon, it's a little snapshot, right, of what was happening in that day. Like, the highest ambition is like what? A doctor, a lawyer, a business CEO. Like, that's the thing. Yeah. Today, it's creative and influencer.
Yeah.
Like, that's what people want to be now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, like, so you take those two things together and you say, okay, people want to be creatives, they want to be influencers, they want to be empowered. How does all that work together? That's why I'm doing Rise.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about. For me, I don't want to, even though we have a whole lot of people on our network, like, I don't want to make this big thing and be like, oh man, Rise is the thing. Everybody come to Rise. Like, I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to like spread it out and like empower people to do what God's called them to do, specifically in the as creatives and influencers. That's literally why I'm sitting here right now on this podcast, because I'm like, I see that kind of stuff and I'm like, man, any way that I can help lend my voice to that, empower that, like, that's what I want to do. You know what I mean? And I think that's where the church is going. Yeah.
I think it would be good for, like, kind of what you're saying, like the people that are like leadership at churches now, or just like the adults, or the older generations, I think they're missing something. Like, they're not looking deep enough into the youth and the younger generation, Yeah. And they're still trying to live in that traditional Christian church bubble, Yeah. Where I think, like, I know a lot of people that they don't like Christian rap, and obviously, like, there's music genres. So some people don't like rap, that's fine. Yeah. But when some people try to make it out to be a bad thing, right? Or you're just giving, like, it's a worldly thing that you're trying to make Christian, or you're trying to like force it, or even like a lot of people will just say, like, it's an alternative, like people always like to compare an artist to a secular artist, where it's like, oh, they're just a Christian Drake or a Christian Travis Scott, or just like whatever. And it's like, no, that comparison doesn't have to be there, right. They're just their own person, just like secular artists are, and they're just creating, the same way that other people do. They're just using their creativity or creative abilities to glorify God and talk about God. And I think part of that is it just flows from themselves. If they are a devoted follower of Jesus, that's going to show in the things that they create. Yeah. And I think especially, like I was talking about, like in like a physical building of a church, and the staff and things like that. I do think there is a lot of churches that are kind of like figuring out or realizing or coming to the realization that, like there's something's different now, like the change is coming. Like that's kind of the idea of this podcast, is kind of focusing on that, going from the traditional church and turning it into more of an untraditional one, and I think that comes with just giving the younger generation more control and more freedom. And I don't know, I think about like kids in churches, the parents are always telling, hey, shut up, like, or whatever, like stop playing games on the phone, listen, or things like that. Where I think there needs to be a higher level of like respect and almost kind of thinking about like passing down the church, and what that's going to look like. Cause I mean, the older generation has a responsibility to maintain the church as it is today, to make sure that when it does pass on to my generation or younger, that it's like they one, that they can trust us with it, but also that they left it in a good enough condition that we can just improve on that, and I think the creative aspect does improve heavily on that. I mean, I know that every church is different. Every place you walk in, I mean, I like CBC. I love that church. I think it's an incredible place. And, but it's huge, tons of people, massive, like the production behind the scenes, you know, the lighting, the music, you know, all the events that they do, you know, that's very untraditional. You know, I mean, I've heard people say like they don't like it, or like they think of non-denominational churches like light show, concert, you know.
Yeah.
And I understand like where they're coming from, but they're coming from that traditional background, you know, like it's like, oh, why does this church look like a concert or a music festival when those are worldly things? You know, we shouldn't try to look like that. And it's not that the church is trying to look like that. It's like they're just using the skills and talents and like their creativity that's God given to create these events and these things. And and I think it's like marketing, like you gotta like, and that's kind of my focus of like, I want to learn how to like, I mean, I'm doing marketing for school. I'm doing communications and marketing. So I want to kind of like, I've seen a lot of like, how do we market the church? Like as bad as it sounds, like you got to market Jesus to today's world, you know, because they're not going to like,
and when you say marketing, you're essentially just saying, get the word out.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. I guess it's just like
so it's
the approach to it. You know? Because like I mean, obviously, like the Bible, right? It's been around forever. But how can we make it like? I mean, now everybody has it on their phone. You know, you have thousands of different translations in an app. And I think the idea is like it's the same Bible, it's the same words, but now we're taking new technologies and new things and allowing it to just make it better, you know, or to like it's easier to get the word out, I guess is the best way to do it. Same thing with social media, you know, I mean, it's not like in person like thing. And it's like, I can disciple somebody through digital art, digital creativity or things like that. And that's another thing I think we could kind of talk about is like just social media and like the state of social media. I think I really like to see it. And like, I talk a lot about it with different people. That like the church kind of missed the wave of social media and technology, and they kind of lost like a lot of that, you know. They kind of were like, oh, we'll give it to the world and let them use it, do it, whatever. And now it's kind of like they're realizing, oh, like we should have like capitalized on that when we could have. But I think like COVID was a huge shift for that within the church, you know. I'm just like using the technologies and social media and digital things to like I said, like market or spread like God's word, you know. So I guess like the question to that would be, what do you think like technology or kind of this newer digital age, how does that help with spreading the word or like how does that help push the kingdom further, but also how does that maybe have a downside, you know?
Man, you're asking some great questions. So I think there's a stat that says that the American church is 10 years behind culture. Like that's the lag is 10 years. Okay. So you think about 10 years ago, like there was no, I mean, like barely Facebook, right? Like there was, what was that? The TikTok was not even like a thing. So all of that kind of stuff. And then so there's actually another stat that says that the UK is 20 years ahead of America in general, like on culture and all that kind of stuff. So you like take those two things together, like you put those two stats together, you're like, okay, the American church is like 30 years behind like current culture. Like, look what's happening out there. Like, and that's wild. And so for me, I'm like, okay, I think some of the reasons why the church is so hesitant a lot of times is because we're always afraid that the devil's in everything, right? We're always afraid, like, okay, the devil's this and this, you know what I mean? And like the Bible says in Psalm 24, the Bible says that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and everyone who lives in it. It all belongs to God. You're talking about creativity, right? Like even a secular artist, like creativity shows off the genius of God.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Even though they're saying all this crazy stuff, it's like yeah, they've been infected with like the virus of sin, but that doesn't take away from the genius of the computer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
like so but Christians, like we're always like, oh man, the devil's in that and the devil's in this, and we're gonna because it didn't. We're afraid of anything that doesn't originate from the church.
Yeah.
As the institution. So if we're like, okay, if we didn't make it, then it must be bad.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what I'm saying? And so I think that you know, that creates like a hurdle for us to consistently jump over. But in answer to your question, like, I think if we start having like forward thinking about, okay, how are we using these things to the glory of God? How are we using rap for the glory of God? How are we using social media to the glory of God? Like, that's how the glory of God fills everything. You know, we can't like step out of these spaces and expect for God to be represented in them, because the church is the representation of Jesus in the world. You know what I mean? So like, if we step out and we're just like, well, like, you know, y'all can have that, man, we're just going praise and worship Jesus. Like, I have to question like if it's actually true like devotion to Jesus if we're stepping out of culture. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So because again, the earth is the Lord's. So yeah, I think there's some good things, man, where the church can step in. I think some of the challenges is, and it's always been a challenge like since the beginning, we take the created thing and make it an idol. Right? So like so instead of using social media, for instance, for the glory of God, now we idolize it. Yeah. That has nothing to do with social media as a tool. It has everything to do with our heart. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I can make anything an idol. My heart can do that. You know what I'm saying? So the tool, yes, social media is great, but now I can start worshiping the likes and all the things, you know what I'm saying? And then start compromising the gospel and what I say because it doesn't hit the algorithm right. And like, you know what I'm saying? Like all of these different things. What if TikTok bans me? You know what I'm saying? Like all this kind of stuff was like, well, I'm not, you know, I'm not worshiping those things. I think that's the challenge. Yeah. You know?
I mean, I like to use the word like idol. I think that's something that I've kind of been learning in like my life of like the best way, or like how to destroy an idol. You know, the best way to destroy an idol is by realizing that it's there, you know? Right. And it's that idea of like what, like kind of taking a step back, looking at our lives and looking at, what is taking the place of God in my life, or what is kind of becoming something that's like between me and God, or separating me from God. And a lot of people don't realize, but it can be something that is like Christian, or like quote unquote Christian. You know, it can be something as simple as like, before you read the Bible, you got to take a picture and post it on your Instagram story, right. You know, or like something like, instead of actually receiving like the sermon on Sunday, you know, you're posting the clips on Instagram, or you're talking about like, and it becomes more of like a self thing of like, look at me, I'm doing these Christian things, you know, I'm like kind of creating this like persona of like what it actually means to be a Christian. And I think the best way to like really tell is like the fruits, you know, or like how, like, to me, it's like my relation, like it's going to be evident that I have a relationship with God through the things that I do, the things that I say, the things that I like, and I'm not perfect, you know, like I'm still going to have like flaws and mistakes. And, but I think it's a good, like, it's a healthy way to look at it as like, what is flowing from people, you know? I mean, if you look at Christian artists, music, you know, what are the words actually saying? Or, you know, it's not as much about who the person is, or this idea of who they are, you know, it's what's the fruit coming from it? What's the impact that they're leaving on other people, you know? So I don't know. I think it's really cool to look at like the world that we live in, and like kind of what you're talking about of like this idea of, the church being behind culture, and kind of how do we like catch back up to it, you know? And I think part of that is just going to be like a lot of trust in people, which like I think
very true.
The church is also scared of that, you know. And I mean, you see, like, I mean, there's flaws everywhere, you know, in churches, in ministries, in people. So it's hard to like really trust somebody to do like these things, you know. But I think it's like you're saying, like it's a community. Like the best creativity comes from a community. That idea of like we can do so much more together, and that's why I like the idea of like I'll shout out like that thing, like the culture initiative that I've been kind of working on and with some friends and figuring out what it looks like to really like come together as creative people, especially as a younger generation, and really push for change, you know, push for this culture shift. And it's not like, I think the best way to describe it is I think a lot of people think that the younger generation is trying to make the church look more worldly. But they're trying like, oh, why are you like taking what the world has and trying to bring that in here? You know, why like the new thing, Christian clubs, you know, I don't know if you've seen stuff about that, but like,
I've seen it.
Like, and honestly, me as a person, I don't know what to think about it, but I'm like, at least there's a place, you know, that's doing that. I hate the word like alternative, but like the idea is like the Bible, like it's like the biblical truth is like, you're going to be able to tell who's a Christian and who's not, you know, there is supposed to be that separation. And I understand why people have a concern of if someone looks worldly, but they're in a church, are they really in the church? You know, are they really, do they have the best, like should we trust them? You know? And I think that comes with just like time, but also seeing what flows from it, you know? Because I think even like somebody like you being a hip hop artist, you know, some churches might be like, why would we bring that in here? You know, why would we?
And they have. They have.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, if you want to share like stories like that, like I'm sure. I mean, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, like, so. Yeah, I'm not gonna put any of the churches on blast, but I've definitely had these times where like mics have been cut off, like, and I'm preaching like the gospel, you know what I'm saying? But people get like hung up on the delivery of it, and they're just like, so they're just like, okay, brother, you know, like they'll cut off my mic and do all these different kind of things, and you know, or after the fact, they feel like they have to clean up stuff that I'm like, bro, come on, man. And you know, I've had people tell me that they've thrown away CDs, that they're never listening to my music and all this kind of stuff, and all of that happens because of one is the present, like the delivery. Yeah. You know, like I'll give you a good example. One time I was actually at a church and I was rapping and I just saw like the adults were just disconnected, right? I said the same exact thing. Like I stopped the music, said the same exact thing just without the music, and it clicked for them. Yeah. And they were like, oh my goodness, yeah, brother. Now all of a sudden I'm anointed and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, it was the same exact thing. You know what I mean? And so like there is that kind of stuff that happens. I want to talk about a little bit about what you were talking about with how do we get caught up, you know, as far as the church. And I think, you know, if we really believe that God is the creator. Yeah. Like we really actually believe that, like he is the original creator and that the enemy can only like copy, you know what I'm saying? And all this kind of stuff. If we actually believe that, then we should be cutting edge creatives. I feel like that. We should be cutting edge creatives. But what happens is, again, I love the church of, we can be so reactive sometimes that we do react to a lot of different things. And so we hear a Travis Scott come out and we're like, what is the church going to do to react to that so we can get the souls? And it's like, okay, bro, like you're already behind. Yeah. If you're thinking like that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and there's certain people who have been like influenced by, you know, worldly music and they love that sound and they're just like, okay, yeah, I want to.
Yeah.
But if I'm thinking like cutting edge creativity, I'm thinking like, okay, how are we thinking like 2 steps ahead of what's going on in culture right now? And some of that does take like a prophetic kind of edge to say, this is where we are, this is where it's going. Mm-hmm. How do we get there before everybody else does? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like that's
exactly
it. And I think creatives can actually do that if we don't copy. You know what I'm saying? If we're just, we take a look at stuff and we're just like, man, that's awesome. And part of that we're gonna be encouraged by other people. We're gonna try to emulate the things that we love and all that kind of stuff. But I think like staying tapped into Jesus. Yeah. He gives us like witty inventions and new things and all that kind of stuff to bring into the world. And I really feel like we just really need to get back in the presence of God instead of like looking at culture and being like, oh man, they're doing that. How can we do that as believers and put the Jesus tag on it? It's like, nah, man, like let's just pray and just see where the Lord wants us to go. That's good. And he's going to take us even further than we would get if we're just trying to react to what the world's doing.
Yeah. And I think part of that, like replicating, like it's a popularity thing, and that's one thing that I want to understand. And maybe it's just because like it's such a new thing, like the idea of being a Christian influencer or Christian artist or things like that, where it's interesting to me how like we can't, it's almost like people say, oh, you can't compete, like let's look at music in the music industry. There's people like I mean, top of the charts is always like Drake, like the Travis Scott, Kanye, Taylor Swift. Yeah, exactly. And I want to understand like how can like why like can Christians not like it's almost like there's like a fear to it. It's like, oh, we can't compete with that, so why even try, kind of thing. And it's not even like trying to replicate what they're doing. It's almost like, oh, I'm not good enough with my own creative ability, to reach that level of like fame, popularity. And it's not about the fame, popularity, but they have like eyes on them, And I think that's where we need to get like and I'm not saying that we need to glorify people, but there needs to be a group of people that become that like idea of a Christian celebrity, as much as like people are scared of that word, it's controversial. There shouldn't be like pastors that are famous, or people that like, oh, we invite them to speak, or even like the music. The idea of being a famous Christian is so scary, but I think the importance of it is like it's the eyes, it's the impact that it can have on people. I mean, easy like me and my girlfriend went to a Taylor Swift concert. And it's sold out, massive crowds of people. I mean, her tour, millions of people, millions of girls across the country, across the entire world.
Girls and their boyfriends.
Yeah. But like, just millions of people trying to, like, the girls show up trying to dress like Taylor Swift. They're trying to replicate that. And it's that popularity, that fame kind of thing. And it's like, if we can have people that are truly devoted to God and to Jesus and using their talents and abilities to glorify God, and we get them to that spot, we get them that far, they're going to have an impact on people, Yeah. And even like, I think about the people, like a person like Taylor Swift or Drake or somebody like, I mean, I don't know them as a person, but if I did, like the idea of like, what if they were a Christian? What if they devoted their life to God, and that would show a shift, in their music, in the things that they're creating, because it flows from who they are, Yeah. And a lot of these people are like a character, but if it truly is them, if they're devoted to Jesus, it'll flow from that, and the impact that it has.
Let me say something to that, because I think with, again, it's so easy to turn something into an idol, and I think in this era where people do want to be okay, okay, But like even in this time where people want to be creatives and influencers, right? Like the easy thing to do is to turn fame into an idol, right?
Yeah.
Now I don't think that fame is bad at all, and I'm going to tell you why in just a minute. Because God said to Abraham, He said, "I'm going to make your name famous."
Yeah.
He literally said that in the scripture. So fame is a tool.
Yeah.
Right?
It is.
It's a tool that God gives when He wants to give it.
Yeah.
And that tool comes for a purpose. Like for Abraham, He was going to make Abraham's name great, and He was going to allow him to multiply. The Bible says because God knew about Abraham that He was going to establish the covenant of God on the earth. Yeah. Right. So that's the reason why the fame came. Yeah. Like for a lot of people now, like and this is my concern, is that a lot of people do want to be famous, but they haven't gone deep in their relationship with the Lord. Yeah. And so they're wanting the product without the process. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
It's like the motive behind it is wrong.
Yeah. So fame is not a bad thing. Like I think that the Lord could use that. When I was in my rap group, we would be praying for these guys, man, to like give their heart to the Lord, because we were saying the same thing. Yeah. Man, what if that person gave their life to the Lord and all this kind of stuff? Man, it would be amazing. I mean, as we kind of developed, we understood like, okay, God doesn't need those people to advance His kingdom, but God still does give out fame to people that He believes are going to be faithful to His covenant on the earth.
You even look at that in like a biblical sense. I mean, the most impactful people in the Bible, they had followers. Mm-hmm. And like I think that's the weird like shift or kind of this like weirdness of today is like okay, let's look at Paul, for example, right? Like he's kind of, everybody knows him, all the different churches, he's sending them letters, and like at that time, like we don't know what living in that time would look like, but Paul was probably a popular guy. People knew him. And it's kind of like you look at today and today's world, what does it look like to be somebody like Paul, and I look at like somebody like you're involved in different ministries, different organizations, different communities, and you have that genuine impact of like you are a devoted follower of Jesus, and you just want to push others to do the same thing, Mm-hmm. And it's that idea of if there's more people like that, and like obviously like right now it's at a very small scale, there's a lot of people doing ministry, doing Christian rap, doing being a Christian influencer on social media, but it's at such a small scale of like I don't know, like you look at a lot of people, like they want more followers on Instagram or whatever. It's the wrong motive behind it. Yeah. But it's like, if you just like are obedient to God, like He'll bring that, but I mean, faithful. You look at Christian influencers now, they aren't big or popular, they might have a couple thousand followers, but they aren't up there with, the big time celebrities, but it's like, what is it going to take to get to that point, and it's like they're scared of it or something. There's a weird stigma of, oh, the world hates Christians, so why should I be a Christian if it's going to be the unpopular choice? It's like, how do we make Christianity popular? Because I don't think it really has ever been, like throughout all of like history, like it's always kind of, it's like, I feel like the last generation or the tail end of it was a lot of like, oh, I grew up in the church. I grew up my parents went to church. I went to church, but it was never a personal, like, I'm devoted to Jesus, and I want to have an impact. And I think that's part of like my testimony of growing up in the church, growing up in ministry, and then getting to a certain point where I realized, oh, like I have a responsibility. And now it's like I want to have an impact on this world, an impact on this younger generation, and like how can I like obviously that's kind of like I need to make sure that God is like pushing me to do things, but following that calling and being obedient to that rather than having the motives of, oh, I want to like be popular or I'm trying to replicate what the world is doing because I want followers.
Yeah,
or I want the fame.
The mode. I feel like the motive is everything, man. Because you can take, again, fame is a tool. You know what I'm saying? And I think you can take a hammer and like build a house, or you can like kill somebody. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't make the hammer bad. It's just the tool. Yeah. And so yeah. And you know what? Like, I'm kind of, if I'm honest, man, I'm kind of like conflicted about like the popularity aspect of it, just because I feel like so Christianity has been popular before. Like, it's been popular in like different like waves. In fact, when Christianity became the official religion of England, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it was like this big old, or not England. It became the official religion of, what is it, like Rome? Like, where it just like it was the official religion, and everybody was just like, oh yeah, now we have to, Christianity is the thing, and I feel like sometimes popularity, if it's not like ordained of God and we just try to do it ourselves, then it does kind of like lose power. And it's not just with Christianity, it's just with anything like that becomes super popular. It's like, it just starts to kind of like it peaks, and then it just kind of starts going, Exactly. But I feel like Christianity has always been this whole this underground movement, and I think part of that is like what makes it like really intriguing. It's like this like underground kind of like thing, like crazy stuff is happening, and it's awesome, but it's just mysterious enough to be like, it leaves people wanting more, So I think I'm all for people like, and Christians being famous and popular, and I think that does do a lot for the kingdom. Jesus was famous. You know what I'm saying? Like I think that's it.
He's arguably the most famous person ever. I mean, but it's interesting looking at that idea of like it's that motive behind it. Because
Jesus would also tell people when he did something awesome. He would also tell people, hey, don't tell anybody about this. You know what I'm saying? Like, he'd be like, hey, just kind of keep it chill. And they wouldn't, but like he would be telling them, hey, don't. So there's this popularity thing. Like, if he was trying to be popular, he would have been like, go tell everybody what I did. You know what I mean? That makes sense. But there's a part of it that was just kind of like mysterious and like, you know what I mean? I think that's a key aspect in like keeping the movement going. You know?
That makes sense. That really does make sense. And I think it's that kind of stigma of like the world that we live in. Like, and I don't know what, like, I don't know what the non-believer like perspective is on like Christianity today, but I do know the Christian perspective, it still kind of feels like we're the unpopular ones. As far as the overall majority of the world. Like, I mean, I'm a college student, I look at this college campus, I look at the lives that people are living, it's like people are scared of the Christian clubs, the Christian organization, the campus ministries, they don't go to church,
Tell me about that. Like, tell me why, like, they're like, have you talked to them and asked them like, hey, like, why are you afraid of that?
I think like a lot of it is the freedom that college brings for a lot of people. I think there's the people that they grew up going to church, they grew up in a very Christian household, but then they get to go off a couple of hours to a school, where they have that freedom, and they're in a square mile of a bunch of people their age, the same age as them, and most of them have the same, like, similar experiences growing up, and those are the people that they get that freedom, their parents are kind of out of the picture, they get to do whatever they want, and then that's when they start to live how they want to live, and they don't follow any form of structure or like the way that Christianity has kind of a structure of this is how you should live kind of thing. And I think part of it just comes with maturity, and like, because there's also the people that had a rough background growing up, and they come to college and they're just ready to kind of explore or kind of see what there is, you know. And I think those are the people that they're easy to, I don't want to say, I guess like they're more susceptible to coming to Jesus, you know, or more open to it because they're trying to figure it out. You know, they're trying to figure out what is the purpose of life kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where there's some people that they kind of are just like, I can do whatever I want to do, and that's what I'm going to do. So I don't know. I think like in today's world, like I really do want to see, like, I think it's so hard sometimes for people that are so far in a church or in a ministry kind of perspective where they kind of forget about the world outside of it. You know, they live in a little bubble of like, my life's perfect, my life's good. Yeah. You know, like all my friends are Christian, like kind of aspect where they don't think about like, oh, why is Taylor Swift so famous? Like, what can we do about that? You know, what can we do? What can we do to insert ourselves like into the culture of the world, but also not bring that culture upon to Christianity, but at least try to keep up with it. You know, it's become so far separated where like sometimes I could, even as a college student, I don't even know what the popular thing is because I'm not living that life. You know, I don't know what people say or think is like cool, you know? And I think like in my life, I mean, everyone I know or most of the people I know are in ministry, you know, they're a Christian, they're walking with God, you know, and that changes a lot of the perspectives and the stories that I'm able to like hear, you know, and the people that kind of the things that I'm exposed to, you know, and I think like sometimes it might be good for Christians to have that reminder of, hey, like, look at the world that we live in and what are you doing to help it, you know? And obviously it's not a bad thing to work in a church or to lead in ministry, but if you're really only focused on the people that are showing up, then I think you're missing the mark on like the real problem, you know? I mean, the people that are showing up to church on Sunday, to youth group, to college ministries, to a small group, you know, those people, like, obviously they're devoted to it and there's room for all of us to grow. Yeah. But it's like, if you're missing out on the people that aren't here, like that's where the people are, you know, that's where the popular, like that's the more popular, that's the majority. Yeah. You know, is the best way to put it.
Some people are never going to step foot inside a church. And I think, you know, so doing youth ministry, part of that was for me really understanding like the needs of the people that were actually coming, you know. So there are like needs that are, you know, people are coming and they actually have like some real needs and they need to be ministered to. But there's that tension of how do we minister to these people, but also reach lost people as well. Exactly. You know,
that's why I think social media is so important. And like, that's kind of my focus I want to say calling, but I'm still figuring that out, you know. And I know I have time, but I think it's that idea of kind of like, what can I there's so many people that are never going to come to a church, but they're going to scroll on their phone, you know. They're going to scroll on TikTok, and that's why I'm hoping things like this podcast, the things that I create, are able to you know, have an impact on people, you know. I mean, the clips from this podcast, you know, that people are going to be able to see that, and it might encourage them to maybe think about going to church, you know. I think we can kind of wrap up here. But I just want to thank you for being here, bro. It was awesome getting to have this conversation and kind of hear about your story and talk about kind of these things going on in culture today, Christian culture today, and kind of how we can push towards like a better future in that. So man, I enjoyed hearing your perspective and everything too, man. So I appreciate the opportunity as well. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in. This was the first episode of the Change. Hopefully we'll be rolling more episodes out soon. Looking to kind of post every other week. So I'm excited, and thanks for being here, Jarrell. So
thank you, man.
Yeah.
You can be on top of it, you gotta be praying for people who losing their stuff, cause they're not looking up, seeing God is gonna bless them. Don't take it for granted, don't test them. Open your ears and just follow the message he sending. I'm saying right now, just stop stressing. Once you give it to him, then all of your pain gon' start ending. Straight on the name, man.